At WhatCulture.com, we spend plenty of time celebrating video games and everything we love about them, but sometimes it's fun to take a cheeky poke at the ones that were considerably less impressive. And by less impressive, I mean straight up trash, because these 10 games have no redeeming qualities, which has earned them the lowest Metacritic ratings in all of video games. In a way, it's an achievement to be in the top 10 worst games, but in another much more real way, it's pretty darn embarrassing. So while we respect making video games is a tricky business, these ones are just absolute stinkers and you probably should avoid them. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are the 10 worst video games of all time according to Metacritic. Number 10, Infestation Survivor Stories. 20%. Starting off strong with the very highest score on this list, we've got Infestation Survivor Stories, and to call this game's development dramatic would be an understatement. The 2012 open-world zombie game was originally known as the War Z, and was riddled with controversies, including, but not limited to, its executive producer calling players a homophobic slur, losing its trademark over similarities to the film name World War Z, trying to get customers to buy from their website instead of Steam by raising the price on Valve's storefront, accusations of fraud due to missing key features, that same producer insisting players just misread the description, and the game being temporarily pulled from Steam. It was also criticized for being riddled with microtransactions, players were being banned left, right, and center, and there were even accusations that devs were bullying and bribing players critical of the game. As for the actual game, Eurogamer called it quite plainly a real disaster. From the development ethical dilemmas to the game-breaking bugs and insidious microtransactions, this one launched as a top-to-bottom mess. And let me reiterate, this game has the highest rating of any on this list, so yeah, buckle in. Number 9, Alone in the Dark Illumination, 19%. In 2015, PC-exclusive Alone in the Dark Illumination came out, and maybe it should not have. The survival horror game holds a Metacritic rating of 19, and one outlet said they couldn't believe that, quote, such an offensively awful game was ever released. The original Alone in the Dark may have set the stage for one of the greatest horror franchises of all time in Resident Evil, but unfortunately Illumination is better left in the dark and completely ignored. Alone in the Dark Illumination comes to the table with some interesting ideas, but unfortunately, it can't deliver on any of them. Critics called the game derivative, boring, ugly, and a complete and utter disaster. Most players were put off by the awful reviews, and the rest steered clear for the sheer fact that this game dragged the good name of Alone in the Dark through the mud. The graphics are bad, the gameplay is bad, it's simply a game that shouldn't have been made. Number 8, SPOGS Racing. 18%. If you're sitting at home at this point thinking, Jessica, what on earth are these video games? Do remember there's probably a really good reason you haven't heard of all of them. Dismissed as Wii Shovelware by IGN, SPOGS Racing was a racing game, go figure, released as a WiiWare title in 2008. Now, if you don't know what WiiWare is, it was basically a service that let Wii users download apps and games specifically made for the console. Let's just say they weren't all winners. The problem with SPOGS Racing, apart from the fact that it has a name that's absolutely impossible to take seriously, was its ugly visuals, woeful racing AI, and straight up broken gameplay. Also, SPOGS stands for Sports Player Object Gyros, if that's something you need to know before you can move on with your day. In a market where racing games are absolutely not hard to come by, there is no reason to waste your time with this one. Number 7, Double Dragon 2, Wonder of the Dragons, 17%. Bumping down another percentage point for this one, we've got Double Dragon 2, Wonder of the Dragons for the Xbox 360. This is a side-scrolling beat-em-up from another massive name brand franchise, so while it would seem like this should have been a slam dunk, it really wasn't. Now, this entry is the remake of the original Double Dragon 2, and it's pretty much just practically awful in every way. Critics slammed the game, calling it boring, uninspired, glitchy, unfinished, shockingly awful, and one outlet even called it one of the worst live arcade titles ever released. Just go back and play the original Double Dragon 2 and not the remake if you're feeling nostalgic, and you'll be good to go. Number 6, Vroom in the Night Sky, 17%. Now, I'm super hesitant to come at indie games for being bad just because they don't have the budgets of larger studios, but unfortunately there's no getting away from the truth that some of them just aren't very good. And for this particular game, there was no getting away from any Metacritic score above 17. As whimsical as this one sounds from the outset, the 2017 Switch launch title was unfortunately hot garbage. The game asks you to embody its motorbike riding protagonist, magical girl Luna. It sorta looks like it was made in MS Paint and definitely didn't have the visuals or the gameplay mechanics to match any other 2017 release. The best critic tidbit here is probably from Destructoid, who said, "This game has nothing to offer the world and will die lonely and forgotten." So clearly no punches were pulled there. The handling for the motorbike is impossible, the game is obviously visually and technically unfinished, and, well, Destructoid got it in one. There's nothing for you here. Go literally anywhere else. Number 5, Leisure Suit Larry, box office bust. 17%. Leisure Suit Larry games aren't everybody's cup of tea, but the series certainly has its moments. Unless we're focusing on the 2009 release box office bust, then there are no moments to be found unless they're moments of what a game looks like. If that's what you're after, this one has you sorted. The ironically named box office bust has absolutely nothing of substance to say, there are 0 laughs to be found, and it's completely unfinished. As if that's not bad enough, the gameplay is repetitive, and Play UK even called it possibly the worst game of its generation. The game was supposed to come to the Wii, but it was received so badly that those plans were scrapped. The writing is lame, the platforming is agonizing, and the camera fights you more often than not. Just about every critic review of this one literally begs the reader not to buy this game, so I don't know what more you need to know. Number 4, Yaris. 17%. If after hearing the title of this one, you're thinking, wait, isn't that a car? Why, yes it is. This game is sort of an ad for Toyota Yaris where you drive around in the titular car, racing and shooting enemies. I am somehow not kidding. Let's keep going. The game is free, and that's all the nice things I have to say about it. It's really weird advertising, completely broken, and has absolutely no redeeming qualities. The graphics are crappy, controls are unresponsive, the gameplay is weirdly obtuse and difficult, and there's nothing in here that can excuse the weird, shameless marketing plug that is the game's existence. There's no reason at all to check this one out unless you feel like pranking your friends, in which, go nuts, that sounds like a great idea. Number 3, Ride to Hell Retribution. 16%. Ride to Hell Retribution is one of the more well-known awful titles in gaming history. The 2013 action-adventure was originally announced in 2008 as an open-world game before being quietly canned. After years in development hell, it did finally come out, at which point everybody discovered at the same time it was super not done baking. Among the many things critics hated about this one, we've got broken mechanics, a boring repetitive gameplay loop, unresponsive controls, awful graphics, dull writing, bad performances, pretty offensive dialogue choices, really awkward sex scenes, and a whole bucket of technical issues. Basically, if you can imagine something that could be wrong with a game, there's a good chance this one has it. It's like the anti-perfect game. Every single thing it sets out to do, it completely fails at. The game appears to be stapled together with no design philosophy, and it was called everything from an offensive abomination of a game in Hardcore Gamers review to explosively apocalyptically bad by Yahtzee from The Escapist. I know you're curious, just don't do it to yourself. Trust us. Number 2, Family Party. 30 Great Games Obstacle Arcade. 11%. This game may not have taken the top spot on our list, but I think we can all agree it wins the award for clunkiest title. Seriously, how did a whole room full of people decide to go with this 7-word abomination? Family Party arrived on the Wii U in 2012 to absolutely no acclaim for very good reason. First up, you need to have 2 Wiimotes and 2 nunchucks to play it, and then good luck playing it because it's almost entirely broken and impossible to control even if you do have the hardware requirements. This whole game is banking on you being into motion controls, which there's a great chance you aren't. It's borderline unplayable, extremely ugly, and its mini-games are uninspired and uninteresting. In short, you'd be extremely disappointed if your parents brought you this one home for Christmas instead of Mario Party. Congratulations, guys, you made a party game that's not fun. Leave this one in the bargain bin. Number 1, Big Rigs Over the Road Racing, 8%. And in our final spot, if you already know your infamously bad games, you'd have guessed it, we've got Big Rigs Over the Road Racing. This is the only game I could find with a handful of reviews that has a single-digit Metacritic score, and boy does it earn it. Much like Box Office Bust, this 2003 racing game had reviewers imploring gamers to not buy this game. Big Rigs places on many worst game of all time lists and has been called the quote, worst game ever made. The game is just stacked to the brim with bugs, there's next to no solid gameplay, the controls are agonizing, it looks atrocious, and not one feature in this game appears to have been finished before they shipped it. If we had to boil the crappiness of this one down to a single moment, we'd have to go with the full caps, "Your winner" victory message that comes up. Absolutely nobody felt like a winner playing this one. That's the end of our list, but do let me know down in that comment box what your pick is for the worst video game of all time. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.